like I mentioned, this is a bit of a refresher. Depending on how long you've worked with me, you may recognize that I do put a lot of emphasis on your lifestyle, and that's because I believe the lifestyle is harder, and I certainly learned to value lifestyle at my time at Hawthorn Box Hill, and particularly under one or a couple of mentors that I've had during my experience there. And the belief is that that's where you can make the most amount of competitive, that's where you can develop the biggest competitive edge, not only with your peers if you're trying to make the senior team, but also with the competition. Because for the most part, and it's the same for you guys, the training is sort of taken care of, and majority of guys around your level are doing more or less the same type of training. So although sports science has developed and we're able to measure greater the loads that the guys are doing and replicate that if it's a successful result with that individual, the type of training really hasn't changed too much over the last sort of 10 years. But where there has been significant growth is around psychology, probably the biggest, sports psychology. Nutrition has just been refined. It's sort of steered away from, like, I don't know if you guys heard the chat with Simone on Wednesday, but that was definitely a good chat to catch up on if you've missed it on live Instagram, where she sort of addressed where nutrition has gone over her 25-year career, and it sort of steered away from diets and rigid meal plans and following a strict plan, and it's moved more towards learning how to cook, enjoying your food, and making sure that the quality of your produce is at the highest level that it can be. And then when it comes to sleep, the more and more research we're doing on sleep, the more and more we're realizing how important it is. And I'll go into Matthew Walker's work a little bit later, but if you're interested in doing some research in that area, he's a bit of a specialist. So it's good to think about how can you improve your motivation around lifestyle, because it's probably more the motivation that is the reason why it's harder than training, because more than often than not, you are doing it by yourself. A book that I'm reading at the moment, I just kept hearing about this guy's name, I think particularly during this pandemic, but even before the pandemic, and that was Viktor Frankl, who was an Austrian neurologist, and he was a psychiatrist and experienced the Holocaust. So experienced some incredible challenges in his own life, and then also has a passion for psychology, and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which has some amazing quotes in it, and this is just one here. Live as if you were living for the second time and if you had acted wrongly the first time. So I want you guys to think back at a moment where you might have made a mistake on the footy field. What was your next action like? It was probably with a fair bit of urgency to repay the mistake you made for the team. So sometimes, or it might be like a couple of players that I'm working with that have been cut from an AFL list. So having that mindset of by acting wrongly the first time, the second time round, you're probably going to have a little bit more urgency. So if you have any sort of regret, or if you didn't give yourself that maximum effort during that time, you're probably more likely to give it maximum amount of effort the next time round. So having that urgency and being able to create it without making mistakes can be a pretty important life's mental skill that you can have. And if you have strong urgency, then you're going to have a big will, and you're going to be consistently doing the things that you can control at the best of your abilities, which is going to be pretty important when you want to reach your potential. Another area with mindset that we want to keep going over and refreshing in our minds is to have the glass is half full type of mindset rather than half empty. So being optimistic and trying to look at the world as if it happens for us rather than not to us. So we're in sync with the world, we're in flow with the world, and the world is happening for us. I think it's a really important perspective to have, And I do strongly believe that if you have a strong outlook on life, it will not only help your preparation, but it will help your performance. And probably the biggest gift that you can have is just around awareness on your individual differences and what outlook or perspective do you have towards certain tasks. And it might be, for instance, like when you're going really, really well in life with anything, that might be when your guard's down, and that might be when your next biggest mistake might happen. That's sort of what Viktor Frankl was talking about before. You want to try and live life as if you made a big mistake the first time round, and you're trying to combat that mistake. So having that urgency and that willingness to give you all and keep a positive mindset is really, really important. So review back those questions that I asked you at the start, and if you feel like through doing this task here, where I've just simply ranked, and you may have seen this sheet before, I've ranked just so it's easy for and transferable to football. I've ranked mindsets and thoughts and coping strategies that we want to try and develop in the red, which is I've ranked it as general population. Then a progression to that, I've gone to community level, and then a progression to that is state level, and then the ultimate goal of getting towards AFL level. And it doesn't mean that all AFL players, because they're AFL players, have an elite mindset, but this is just a bit of a measuring system that I've created. That's an easier way for you to sort of position yourself and see where you are in these different areas in your own journey, and then strive to be better in that certain area. So look through the areas and just identify where you sit on these measures. So for instance, if we look at thoughts, a general population or an area that we want to try and steer away from, if those destructive thoughts where you're really, really critical of yourself and it's not productive, which is quite common with high level athletes or any level athlete. We can be our worst enemy, and our mind, rather than it being our biggest friend, it can be one of the main reasons that we don't reach our potential. So being connected to that, being aware of how critical you might be on being yourself, and knowing that you are enough, and being able to detach yourself from your performance. So just because you played a bad game doesn't mean you're a bad person. That's really, really important for your own mental health, but also for your performance going into the next game. If you attach your whole worth towards a weekly performance, then that's not going to help your recovery. It's not going to help your teammates, and it's going to make it really hard to get out of that position that you find yourself in with that thought process. Whereas if you can sort of approach a bad game with like the glass is half full, break it down, detach yourself from it, and just look at it as an opportunity to learn and be at ease with your thoughts, then you're much more likely to be able to bounce out of that form slump. So just note down where do you find yourself in that space. From an awareness point of view, it's more or less around how negative your thoughts might be and how much you're worrying about the past or the future, opposed to are you someone that just focuses on being present and essentially thinking where your feet are, wherever you are in space at that time. Is that where your thoughts are? And trying to steer clear of worrying too much about the future or being critical about the past experiences. In terms of coping strategies, this is something that throughout 2020, I'm sure we've all been tested at times about how we can cope with these challenges of the unknowing and not knowing the future, particularly. Whether it be where you're playing football next year, or when are you next going to play a game. It might be when are your exams going to be, all these things that have been turned on their head. How do you deal with that, and what's your emotional health like during those times? So how have you been able to deal with those? And usually we need to be able to deal with hard times to be able to deal with future challenges. So it's not so much that we're avoiding stress, it's just how are we learning from stressful times in the past, and how is that being able to better us to be able to handle future stress and cope with it, to a point where you actually thrive during those high pressure moments, opposed to be overwhelmed. So same thing, just tick where you might sit in that area. So you might just write on your journal, coping, and at the moment you're sitting at general pop, and you want to try and focus on developing this area of your emotional health. Reactions, which is what triggers you in life, and how do you act? Are you calm and collected and deal with those situations in a calm way, or do you react with anger or frustration and get really heated in those moments, which we always will experience those times. So it's being able to have, yet again, the awareness, self-awareness on, oh, yep, this is something that I know I've dealt with in the past. It might be in a game, dealing with a teammate, whatever it might be. How can you better deal with those situations that challenge you? And then mindset, so performance mindset. What are you focusing your energy on? So is it the important tasks that you need to do throughout the day and being productive, or are you just being busy for the sake of being busy and you're not getting stuff done, and you're getting distracted by other things that aren't too important to your life? And the last one there is the recovery. So understanding that the mind works just like the body. It needs hard, intense training to improve. So, dealing with stressful situations, problem solving, and being challenged. But equally, it does need recovery. It needs quiet time, and being able to recognize that and know what the most effective quiet time for you is really, really important to rejuvenating yourself and keeping you motivated and hungry to improve. If you're feeling burnt out and starting to get sick of your football or sick of the training, that's really, really important to recognize and make a change. And you can either make a change by, if I'm your strength and conditioning coach, speak to me so I can make a change to your program, or it might be you just need to shake up the football training that you are doing, and make the running sessions. If at the moment there's no structural football training, so it might just be, how can you add football into your run blocks by bringing a mate along and having a kick and drip feeding footy work in with your runs. So having that flexibility and being able to add variation to your training is really important for your mindset. And then last one on mindset, really important to enjoy the in-between moments and do good. So a quality person equals a quality athlete. So if you're doing good for those around you, whether it be the trainer that's just giving you a rub on game day, being good to everyone that's part of the footy club goes a long way, and you feeling like you belong to that footy club, as well as your energy staying in check and you feeling like it's a place that you want to be at. So I think that's a really important one to finish on. So moving over to nutrition, Simone Austin, so I caught up with her on Wednesday. I've just started this new, it's like a podcast sort of set up on Instagram where I'm catching up with specialists in their field. And Simone was the nutritionist she's a dietitian that I caught up with on last Wednesday. And that's on my Instagram, IGTV. If you missed that, there's a recording there. And for the whole 30 minutes, just dropping gems. So if nutrition is an area that over this next page you identify as an area that you want to work on the most, then definitely watch that segment. And her philosophy was very much around the athlete's ability to be able to cook for themselves is really, really important. So then when you move out of home and your parents have done majority of your cooking, if you have cooking skills, and she mentioned at least 3 meals that you can make, then that's going to put you in good stead for the rest of your athletic journey, because you're less likely to eat out and you're more likely to enjoy the food that you're eating, and be able to have the skills to add variation to your food. She mentioned that athletes want to strive to having over 30 different vegetables over a week is sort of her aim, which is a lot. So yeah, important to have cooking skills is the main fundamental that she focuses on when working with elite athletes. So same as the mindset task. I won't go through every one of them like I did with the mindset, but now that you know how this chart works, go through the same process. So go through each row. So if it's produce quality, and just note down, where do you sit on these measures that I've created? Do you sit in the general pop area where most of your food comes from takeaway, or do you sit at the AFL level where you cook it yourself, or it's homemade, so your parents are making it, and the ingredients are locally sourced, or they're organic biodynamic produce? And go through that for each row. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. Another 30 seconds, guys, to go through that. Let me know if you need more time. Okay. And then, like I mentioned before, Matthew Walker, so he's a neuroscientist and psychologist, and he spent a lot of his research on sleep. And if you're interested in reading a book on sleep, this is the one that I'd recommend to get a deeper understanding of the importance of sleep, and why some of the athletes like LeBron James and Roger Federer will, during highly competitive periods, whether it be the NBA finals or a Grand Slam, they'll sleep over 50% of their day, so over 12 hours they'll spend sleeping, whether it be 10 hours at night and then a couple of hours of drip feeding naps into their day. So whether you want to read the research or just understand what elite athletes are doing that have had very long careers at the highest level, both are showing the importance of the why you need a quality sleep in your life. So same task here. This one's a little bit shorter, but just get a bit of an understanding on where you sit with your sleep quality. What's your timing like? How restless are you? And what sort of duration are you getting? More important than anything is the quality of sleep. So sometimes we'll just measure your sleep by how many hours you sleep, which is important part of measuring sleep, but it's not the number one. The most important thing is the quality of sleep that you're getting. And that's why I've broken it down to 3 important areas, which is the timing, which is really important for your circadian rhythm, We want to be getting to sleep well before midnight. And that's important not only for your ability to get into deep sleep, but also for your hormonal system. So improving your testosterone growth hormone. Research has shown that if you get to sleep around that 9 to 10 o'clock and you get 2 hours of deep sleep before midnight, then you'll hit your individual peak of both growth hormone and testosterone, which are really, really important for athletes. Both in maintaining your lean muscle mass, improving your lean muscle mass, but also your ability to recover between training sessions. Then your restlessness. So this is quite connected with your mindset and your mental recovery. If you're overtraining because you're going through a big training block, although you're really tired, you may be more restless because it is a stress on the body, overtraining, and sometimes during those times, although you'd expect to sleep better and have the highest quality sleep, if you're overtrained and burnt out, then your sleep quality will actually be down, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's definitely a fact. If you're just simply overreaching because you've had a big training day or a big day at school or work, and your body's in hormonal balance, then you will get into a much deeper sleep because your body needs that recovery. So if you're finding yourself restless and you're not going through a highly stressful period, this can be a bit of a measure that you might be overtraining, and it can be a good sign to pick up on before getting injured, that your restlessness is up. So you're in a period where you'd expect to be sleeping more or deeper, but you're finding you're actually quite restless. That's good feedback for me to know and for you to understand that we need to change your training load and give you a bit of a deload period. And then the last one, obviously the duration is important. So there's a certain amount of time that we need to get, and athletes definitely need more sleep than your average Joe. Not everyone has the ability to be able to nap, but if you can, that's definitely optimal. Whether that be, after a game day, you fit in a 30-minute nap after the game, main training session in off-season, pre-season, you fit in a nap. Maybe you're doing shift work, and to be able to bank in more quality sleep, and to be able to cope during that period of your life, you add in some naps. So it's just a good tool to have, and just have the understanding that the best of the best athletes do nap. It doesn't require any special gadgets or expensive technology, but it's one of the best things that you can do to boost your hormonal health and improve your recovery, which is going to improve your energy to train and train hard. I'll give you guys another sort of minute to fill out where you rank in these sort of areas, and then we'll go into the training side of things. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So before going to the physical side, these are the three guys that I've learnt the most of. I'm definitely grateful to have these guys in my corner and to be able to lean on them still to this day. But over my last sort of 5 years working as a strength and conditioning coach in football, all three of these guys have helped me massively. So I just want to shout out to them. So the periodization model that we follow in football and other elite sports do it as well. So soccer is famous for it, and some rugby teams. It's called funnel periodization. And simply what it means is that the training that you're doing over the year, the amount of load does fluctuate, but doesn't change hell of a lot in terms of the weekly volumes that you hit, but it's the way that we do those volumes that changes significantly. So let's say over a given week, you're running up to 15K a week. What that looks like in November is 50% of that might be with no football in your hand, doing conditioning-based running, and 50% of it is with a football in your hand, doing skills. By the time it's March, at the pointy end of this funnel, we want to be as specific as we can. So it's playing scratch matches, small-sided games, 90% of the load of that 15K over your week is playing the game. So it's a really simple periodization model. We start general and work on the basic fundamentals that individual needs. It might be running mechanics, it might be lifting in the gym, might be more craft work on the field, it might be more combat work with the wrestling coach, whatever it is. So you're working on your general craft and working on all your things in sort of isolation. And then as we get closer to the season, you start to pull them all together and you do them in game specific situations. So I think that's a good one for you guys to understand when you're either catching up with your mates and working on your craft. You want to try and break it down in the off season and work on the real basics and do them really, really well. And then as you get closer to the season, you may be focusing on those sessions where you're doing outside of your football schedule, might be more revolved around recovery opposed to adding in more work, or it might be revolved around less amount of time, but the intensity is really, really high. And it's more specific to areas of your game that you're trying to really improve. So it's more targeted. So it's a good philosophy to understand. And if I haven't explained it well enough and you don't understand it, make sure you ask at the end of the presentation. Happy to explain it a bit more. These are all my numbers. They're not specific to any particular research. They're just anecdotal. So what I've noticed over my time, you can definitely be too strong for football in the sense that you've got to a point where you're strong enough, and then we want to focus more on power and speed, or just maintaining that strength, because the amount of work that you need to do to improve it is too much, and it would take away from other areas of your game that's more important. So it's not a matter of just always getting stronger and stronger and stronger with football. You get to a point where you're like, yep, that's now a competitive advantage for you. We just want to hold on to it, and let's focus your time over the weeks on some other areas in your game, because football is so there's so many layers to it. So same as we did with the lifestyle areas, just note down where do you sit, roughly speaking, in these different tests. This can be a bit of a feedback and some of the stuff you might already understand and sort of already had awareness around where you sat, and some might surprise you, and that's fine. So this will be good feedback for me as well to be able to improve that area. So we've got the double leg squat, whether it be a back squat or a box squat, double leg deadlift, whether it be your barbell or your trap bar. That's all the strength testing is all relative to your weight. Same with bench press, bench pull, relative to your weight. Then we've got our different 2K, so key position guys. There's some benchmarks there, or your running base players, which is that's your half backs, half forwards, and midfielders inside and out. GPS pre-season. So if you don't have a GPS unit, or you've got a Garmin watch, or even if you don't have that, it's just basically how injury-free are you? So over a pre-season, did you do less than 60% of training with your team because of injury? Did you do, up to 75%? Did you do up to 90? And that's that's more important than most things on this chart, is your ability to be able to handle training loads and be resilient. And if you hit over 90% of preseason, you've just given yourself your best chance to not only play throughout a year with less risk of injury, but also perform because you're well prepared to play in that team and understand the structures and the technical, tactical side of the game and team cohesion and everything. So that's a really important number. How much of the preseason were you able to complete? Your recovery to work ratio. What I mean by here is if you're training for 10 hours a week and you're only spending 2 hours on recovery, then you're sitting at a 25% work to recovery ratio. This is more important when we're getting into the season. When we get into a season, you want to be aiming towards that at least 1-to-1 ratio. If you can do above that, like professional athletes do, that's great. But if you can aim for that 1-to-1 recovery ratio, and what you might find if you played a hard game on a Sunday, your Tuesday with the team's probably going to be more recovery based, or it should be at least recovery based. So that training session would, all the time that you dedicate to that, would count as recovery, assuming you're not under high fatigue and you felt better after the session than you did before the session, then that would be counted towards your recovery for the week. Obviously, ice baths, saunas, going for a light walk, foam rolling, stretching, yoga, Pilates, all those things are included in this. Even like an activation type mobility session in the gym would be recovery based work. And then you got your functional testing, chin-ups and calf raises, Nordics, which is the hamstring exercise. That's a metric there. We've used the Nord board, those numbers. So if you have used Nord board, it's all about how strong your hamstrings are when they're under stretch during the Nordic and how much force you're able to generate onto the machine. And the stronger your hamstrings are in a movement where they're being stretched, like the Nordic, the research is strong on this, that you're less likely to get hamstring strains, which is the most prevalent injury in football. And it's not just about being strong and being strong on length, but also having symmetry between your legs. So we want to try and have your left and right within 10%. Single leg squat and then bench adduction. So just same thing, same as the lifestyle ones, just sort of measure off where you sit and what you need to focus on. Another 10 seconds, guys. Okay.